you've talked about a vision where you go from, and as we've been talking about this whole episode, where you go from these kind of error-prone JSON-based scratch pads that Jupyter notebooks are into a full stack developer platform where exploration and deployment converge, just as in, having a data app there ready to go instantly. So when tools collapse the boundary between notebook and application, that seems to change not just workflows, but also how roles work. So as this line blurs, what kinds of new responsibilities and skills should our listeners adapt, or does this just mean that they don't have to kind of develop engineering skills? Yeah. So how does it change things for our listeners who are, maybe developing data applications, developing models for deployment, and then after you've kind of thought about the how it changes things for an individual, how does it change things for an organization? In terms of research, engineering, operations, this something like Marimo seems to break down a lot of silos.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's an astute observation. So, um, in terms of the individual, like the practitioner, data scientist, or even ML engineer, or AI engineer, data engineer, I think the way that I think about it is that Marimo gives them like new capabilities um, to like make their work just like far more useful in the organization. And that gets into your second question too. How does that change things within an organization? So the data app is like one good example. Like previously, like you may have had to, you may have done your experiment in a notebook, and then you're like, okay, where's the front end engineer who can help me like actually like build an application around this to make my work actionable. At best you might like try to reach for something like Streamlit, but like you would hit performance bottlenecks there rather quickly. It's like with Marimo, like there's no migration phase. Like your notebook, should you want it to, just change a couple of variables to like sliders or drop downs or tables or whatever you need, and then all of a sudden you have a data app that you can then share with your team, but also like to your CEO. So like actually at a number of companies that are using us, CEOs are using Marimo notebooks that their data scientists made for them. Sometimes the CEOs are actually making their own Marimo notebooks to like run their own operations, just because like the barrier entry is like so low, and it's even lower like once you consider like LLM integrations that we have, like just like vibe code your way through like a pretty simple sort of tool that you can make. So that is one way that I think Marima like gives the data scientists new capabilities and also brings new people sort of into the fold. There is another way, um, and it has to do with what you mentioned of like Marima notebooks being stored as Python files, because actually every Marima notebook is an executable script. It's just a Python file. Like you can go to the command line, say Python mynotebook.py, even pass a command line arguments. So like from your notebook, now you actually have a workflow that you can like run as a pipeline or as a cron. And so that's like yet another way by like reducing that friction. We've now made you hopefully like a lot more productive. And also, there's a lot of alsos, but because it's a Python file, you can actually say like from my notebook, import my function or like import my class. Um, and when you do that, that means that like, there's famously like for like many years now, people have talked about like the notebook to production handoff, the researcher to engineer handoff. Like that makes that handoff like a lot less difficult, a lot more streamlined. Because like as Marimo nudges you to write better code and it like gives you these reusable functions, you can actually give your notebook to someone and they can import it and just use the logic. You could even write tests for your Marimo notebook. Marimo works with PyTest. Um, so that's another way that like it makes like notebooks actually more useful in the engineering context as well.